This here is another viewer's broken gaming PC, and it's missing a CPU cooler. This viewer decided to start tinkering with things because it would not power on. So he took the cooler off. He actually lost two of the screws to remount it. It's kind of a mess. So we're gonna give this thing the once over and hopefully have it fixed pretty quickly in this video. Are you ready? Stay with me.
If you're looking for a modern way to work with email, check out Mailgun. With its data-driven approach and easy-to-use UI, you can reach real customers at scale. Mailgun controls the entire email lifecycle from pre-development through delivery with its powerful email API and intuitive email marketing solutions, supporting companies like DHL, Wikipedia, and Microsoft. You'll find useful tools like send time optimization, which automatically tracks and pushes emails to individuals at the times they're most likely to engage with them. You can also create massive reports for large email lists and test and avoid things like spam filters the next time you click send. Mailgun is the most relied upon email platform for growing businesses, and we greatly appreciate their continued support of this channel. Try it today by using my link, mailgun.com/Greg, which you can also find at the top of this video's description.
Hey there, and welcome to Fix or Flop. If you're new here, relevant info is in the video description. Just know that everything you see done in these videos is done free of charge. We don't charge anything at all, including replacing hardware, or what hardware we might have to replace. Sometimes we dip into our own pockets, have to buy things on eBay, etc. That's fine. I make more than that back very easily here on YouTube, thanks to not only AdSense, but also some of our brand sponsors. Then we also sometimes get sent stuff for free from companies who are just happy to have the exposure in a video like this. So it works out really well, and we've had so many entries lately. I mean, not even just local entries, tons of folks who are just crossing their fingers in hopes that we eventually get to stuff outside of the Orlando, Florida area. I can tell you it's probably not gonna happen. So if you don't live near me, somewhere around Orlando, or you're not willing to drive to me twice, because you have to drop it off and then pick it back up again, just don't bother. We don't even open those because we have, frankly, enough entries as it is locally. First things first, I want to attempt to power the system on. This baseline is important. It puts us on the same page as the owner, and it looks like we're on the same page. I'm not sure if the mic's gonna pick this up, but I hear a very prominent click coming from the power supply. It sounds like the system wants to fire up, and then it immediately shuts back off again. Let's see if I can get it on the mic. Oh, now it's not clicking at all. Okay, so let's try. I'm gonna turn it off, drain some caps here, if anything was loaded up. All right, let's see if we can hear it this time. Yeah, the power supply is clicking on and then right back off again. And that makes me want to think it's a power supply issue. That's where I would start. With something like this, it looks like power delivery. Check the power supply first. Behind the motherboard tray, things actually look very clean. I'm not seeing anything miswired. This is a semi-modular unit, but the only modular cable connected looks to be SATA power, and it is slotted all the way in. If there's something wrong on this side of the power supply, maybe something was desoldered, or there's an issue with the board in here, this is just going to be an outright power supply replacement. If it's not a power supply problem, then it's possible there might be some bent or missing pins. This is PGA, so we might be dealing with a broken pin or a bent pin on the AMD CPU, or it could be the motherboard that is shorted somewhere. But just as I suspected, this power supply looks to be cooked. Looks like we're getting a fail on everything except for the 5 volt, and it's actually similar to a recent Fix or Flop video we had. This power supply looks to have the same problem. And you can see on the back here, we've got the 24 pin, the PCI supplemental 6 pin, and the CPU EPS 8 pin connected. So yeah, this thing looks to be toast. But this isn't where the story ends, and you guys know me. I like to dive deeper if possible to figure out the real root cause as to why components fail. And in this case, I noticed that I still had the SATA power cable connected to this Samsung Evo drive, or whatever, the Samsung 960, 970, whatever it is, SSD. If I disconnect this SATA cable, this is the only cable connected to any component in here from the power supply. So now it's just sitting here unused. If I go to then power on the power supply again, it powers on just fine. And we don't have any issues at all with our 12 volts. Let's see, the timings are a bit rough. But other than that, things look great here, no fails. And that leads me to believe that it's either a cable issue or a port issue on the power supply side. So let's play around a bit.
A few moments later.
You know what? I might have been wrong altogether. So I tried multiple ports on the power supply side for that SATA cable. I tried different physical connectors in the SATA daisy chain just to see if any of that would allow the power supply to turn on and stay on when connected to the SSD. Didn't work at all. And then I went so far as to connect the SATA cable to this little passmark tester, the one I always use. I actually should have probably, in hindsight, connected the SATA cable initially. I just didn't think it'd be the problem. And the power supply booted up just fine. So according to this at least, there's no issue at all with the SATA cable, the SATA connection, or the power coming from that SATA port in the unit. We might have a shorted SSD, which I haven't run into in the 2 years I've been doing this. This is a first. So we're gonna run a few more tests with a different unit, see if we can replicate the same issue. Okay, maybe I was wrong about being wrong, because now when I connect this separate unit that I know works, we've used this in many Fixer Flop videos, I've connected it to the SSD, also connected it to the motherboard. It works just fine. The system powers up, the DRAM lights up, everything. I haven't tried for a post yet, just because we don't have the cooler on the CPU yet, but we got a lot further than we did with the other unit. So maybe I was, look, maybe I was wrong about being wrong, okay? It happens. Not really, but it does happen here. I'm just a bit bamboozled because SATA voltage, again, looks fine for the original unit. If there was an issue here, then it wouldn't be tripping every time we connected it to this SSD. But then when I connect a separate power supply to the same SSD, it boots up just fine. So what are we missing here? I'm super confused. And just because, again, I wanted to cover all my bases, a third power supply, well, the third in this equation, a second replacement unit, and this one also includes enough power to support this graphics card here. So I've got two independent 8 pins running to the card, the 24 pin, the 8 pin EPS, as well as a SATA power cable connected to the SSD at the back. Everything is connected as it was when the system came in here. And with the unit on, I'll go ahead and show you. The rig boots up just fine. I'm obviously not going to keep this on because we don't have a CPU cooler. The chip's not getting hot yet. But there you go. No problems. So I guess it is his power supply to blame, and I'm just going to assume that this inline PSU tester is not picking up whatever issue we were seeing in person, which I'm a bit disappointed by because this hasn't steered me wrong before until now. And I'm not sure why this wouldn't see an issue with SATA power. But that definitely appears to be the issue because, again, if I reconnect to this white unit, I've done it 2 or 3 times off camera already, the moment a SATA power cable is connected to that SSD, it completely freaks out. So yeah, this is looking like a very straightforward power supply replacement. Now his unit is an Antec, looks like an EA750G Pro unit. I've never actually used this unit before, I don't think I have. 80 plus gold certified, it looks to be pretty decent, but yeah. I do suspect it is the problem just based on what you guys have already seen in this video. So let's go ahead and replace it with something else. This here is a Corsair RM850X. Now these are tried and true units. I would put my money on these every day of the week. They have great warranties, 80 plus gold certification, and this one's fully modular with an extra 100 watt buffer, 850 versus 750 in his. So I think this is a decent little upgrade for him. We'll go ahead and wiggle her on in, and you probably noticed I've got a lot more cables connected than he originally had with his, and that's just in case he decides to upgrade some things down the line or include extra components. He'll have Molex in here, an extra SATA cable strand, and an extra PCIe cable. He was missing a 4th power supply screw, so we'll go ahead and take care of that for him. And we'll take this time to reinstall his CPU cooler. He was missing a couple of screws here as well. We took care of that for him. Looking good so far. We'll get everything connected here power-wise. If I can get this 8 pin in there. There we go. And we have cable managed at the rear. All right, folks, it is time to power on officially with everything reconnected, and we're gonna try for a post this time. Looking forward to a post right out of the gate. This should be good news. So let's see. All right, power's on, that's good stuff. Probably should have posted already. Okay, let's maybe try clearing the CMOS. I'll check RAM seating right because we're starting from 0 again. We're a little further along than we were before, but we're basically at the start of another fixer flop if you want to look at it that way, because now we have a system that no longer posts. So what could it be? I hope he doesn't have multiple things wrong with this. I'm not going to rebuild this entire rig if several things are broken. if the motherboard's cooked or the CPU's cooked, I mean, oh my gosh, maybe the motherboard damaged one of those components. Maybe it damaged multiple components. Not good. But yeah, you can see these 4 debug LEDs above the 24 pin. None of these are lighting up when we turn the system on. And that's not a good sign. It means it can't run system checks, which means there's probably a serious issue elsewhere with this rig. So, clear the CMOS, that didn't do anything. Reseated RAM, that didn't do anything. Then I tried to trick the system. Every now and then you'll see me do this. I'll remove all of the system RAM outright in hopes that the rig will actually give me some sign of life apart from just a simple powering on procedure. And you can see we still don't have any lights in the DRAM, or excuse me, the debug LED assembly up there. You should be getting at least a DRAM light at this point. But because nothing is lighting up, the board isn't really giving us a sign of life. I don't really see, well, are there LEDs up? No, there's no LED lighting up on this board at all. I'm not sure if this board actually has LEDs or not. But because we're not seeing that sign of life, graphics card fans are spinning. I'm going to assume that it's either the CPU or the motherboard at fault here. So we're gonna take this cooler back off. I know I have to repaste the stupid thing all over again, because it looks like there's another issue we have to deal with. Ignoring the goo on the back of this chip, it looks like the pins are all intact on this 3900X. So physically, checks out fine here. The socket is also clean of debris. So now I've got a replacement CPU in here. This is just a 5500, and this is gonna rule out the CPU as a potential culprit. If we still don't get any reaction from this board, I'm going to assume that the board is to blame. I'm gonna power this on briefly here to see if we get any sign of life. Oh, whoops, I forgot. I gotta turn the switch on at the rear. Okay, here we go. Oh, we are getting lights. It looks like, sorry, I'm just making sure the chip's not getting super hot here. So we get DRAM LEDs illuminating now. I'm just waiting to see if that DRAM light changes to something else or if we're still stuck on that. Okay, it's starting to heat up now. I'm gonna go ahead and power it off again. I think the fact that we're getting some sign of life now from the board tells me that it looks like his CPU is to blame, which, well, this wouldn't be the first time a Zen 2 chip decided to kick the can. But here's the thing, even with the cooler attached, the system never posted. Now, that DRAM light stayed lit the entire time. Again, no reaction on screen. The system never had its fan curve kick in or anything like that. I even swapped out his DRAM for a single stick of known working DDR4 from my stash. Still nothing. So it's actually not DRAM that is causing the problem here, very clearly. I think it's just giving us a different symptom, showing a different symptom because it's a different generation, a different CPU architecture, perhaps, 5500 versus 3900X. But I know that his CPU actually works, which is a good sign. My kid just opened. What's up, buddy? Whoa, does I get a snack?
There'll be none now.
Whoa!
None is there.
Okay, where were we? So his CPU I know works now because we put it into a separate rig, and I know all the other components here obviously work, and check it out. We get a post. So his CPU seems fine. Again, I think the motherboard is the culprit. I don't suspect his DDR4 is bad, but that would be a pretty quick swap if it was. At this point, we're replacing so much hardware. Holy cow. The board we'll be replacing with his, by the way, is a B550 Aorus Pro V2, in case you were wondering. So now I'm ready to try this again. After 2 swaps, let's see if we get a post. I'm really hoping this time that things are all good. So DRAM lights up. The DRAM LED is also lit on the board. I'm really hoping this works. Why is it still saying that there's something wrong? Is there something wrong with this DRAM? Is that why it keeps saying that? But I even swapped out DRAM. What on earth is going on with this rig? Now, just in case you're wondering, and it's a valid concern because I've seen it happen firsthand, There is nothing in the case that could be shorting the back of the motherboard. There aren't any standoffs in places where they shouldn't be for an ATX board. Everything behind this looks fine. At this point, I've got the test bench motherboard in here, the test bench graphics card, and the CP from his rig in here as well. The only change from the test bed you saw that was outside of the case is the power supply. And I know the power supply works because I've used it in other rigs as well, and other builds that we've run tests on actually. So let's go ahead and power it on as is. And assuming this post, we're going to be replacing things piece by piece until we notice something go south. And that might be the thing that sheds some light on, why is the fan not spinning? Oh, did I wire it wrong or something? Oh, yeah, there we go. Okay. So at this point, at this point, we're going to get that post.
A lot of boring math later.
Power on. Power on. DRAM lights on. Switch to VGA light. And there's our post. Everything looks great out of the gate. VGA light is on. It's posted. And then we've got Hive OS. Oh, okay, so Windows isn't on this machine. Basically right now it's trying to mine, and that's what you would use Hive OS for, I imagine. Not too familiar with this stuff. I've never mined before, but just a quick Google search, and that appears to be what this person was doing with this rig, which is probably why it had issues. I'm not the biggest fan of mining. I'm not against it, but it's just not something I've really condoned on the channel ever before. So I'm going to turn this off because, holy crap, the card is running super hot. Yeah, just something to take note about. But now that I've had a bit more time to think about this, I do find it strange that the owner didn't disclose that this was mined with. And I feel like that would have been pretty useful information, because the way that his description reads for when he submitted the application for this rig to be fixed on the channel, he said that he left it on when he went to work, which I do that all the time. I rarely turn my systems off. At idle, they sip on power, so it's not really a big deal. But he came back and the rig was off. He tried to power it on and it wouldn't. He could hear a little click in the power supply, which is what we heard, but that was it. No power, no post, nothing. So then was he mining with the rig while he went to work? He said he left it on, he left it running. So if it was running, does that mean it was mining the entire time? And if it was, why didn't you tell me that? Were you afraid that I was going to reject the submission? I've never publicly said that I would. I'm aware that people mine with their rigs, and that's totally your right. You can do what you want with your hardware. As long as you obtain the components in a fair way, you pay what everyone else pays. Do whatever you want with your components. Gamers don't complain that people use graphics cards to 3D render and do other things like that. Gamers like to complain about miners using them because miners have, in the recent past, bought them in bulk and done kind of scummy things to get around the retail side of it, which most of us gamers have to deal with. They'll buy pallets before they even meet the retailers. The distributors will do that. And that's a very frustrating thing. And I understand why, in those cases, you would be upset at miners. But if you're just mining on the side with a single graphics card, that's your right. Do what you want. But tell me that. Tell me if that was what was happening when the rig died, because that could have saved you a bit more trouble. And I definitely would have rolled out the graphics card earlier on than I did. The new power supply was needed. For sure it was needed. The motherboard, for whatever reason, that replacement board wasn't working, the B550 gigabyte board. I'm swapping that one out again for this X570S, and we've got a post. It boots straight into the SSD, and you can see Hive OS ran right away. So that's where I'm going to leave it. The rig works now. I told the viewer that I see it was used for mining, and I told him, I said, you should have told me that, it would have helped. But he hasn't responded yet. Maybe he's at work or something. Just in the future, just tell me, be honest with me. Okay, if it's like a mining assembly, you've got like 8 cards lined up and then you submit a form and you're like, hey, please help me, I might not accept that one, okay? Because you clearly bought a lot of cards in bulk and it's just a very different use case that I'm not familiar with. So when it comes to troubleshooting, things might change. But in this case here, I mean, whether you're mining with it or gaming with it or what have you, it's still a desktop assembly. It's still got a single card. It's got a 3900X in it, for crying out loud. I mean, that's overkill for mining. But knowing that stuff up front would really help. So please do disclose those things. Don't be afraid to tell me that you have mined with your rig in the past. I know that it's really none of my business, but in the context of troubleshooting, it does help. So that's all I want to say there. Again, thankfully the rig is up and running again. It took replacing 2 solid components to get it up and running, but it doesn't appear to have any issues any longer. You can see here I've stripped down his entire motherboard to just bare PCB. We don't have any heat sinks or anything covering any of the important components. VRM MOSFETs here up top, the chipset down here. I tested the battery voltage, that was fine. Obviously we cleared the CMOS and did that many times actually throughout this video. I don't see any physical defects though, and that is kind of odd, but I mean, there's not much more I can do here. I'd much rather just replace the motherboard than start probing randomly in hopes that I find something shorted. And as for this power supply, I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole, despite it not showing up with errors occasionally in our PSU inline tester. I don't trust this, and I'd much rather, again, just replace it for peace of mind. You're going to get a brand new warranty with the Corsair unit anyway. I'm sure Antec makes great power supplies. We've built with power supplies from them in the past, but this particular one, I'd rather stay away from it. And one last thing I noticed when I was swapping motherboards out, this guy was using incorrect screws to tighten this down. Some screws weren't threading it at all because they were different threads entirely than the ones he should have been using. So I've got correct ones in there now. The motherboard is secured properly. So this one was interesting. When you have more than one component broken at a time, it can be difficult to troubleshoot, and it can make you doubt your diagnosis. It can make you doubt the order of operations. Well, is the power supply actually dead if the motherboard was also dead? And that's why I was so thorough with our power supply testing, why I tested with 2 other units as well to make sure that it wasn't the SSD that was shorting, to make sure that it wasn't the CPU or the motherboard. It did, in fact, however, end up being the motherboard that was preventing us from posting. So another layer to this, the system wouldn't turn on. That's a power supply issue. But the system wouldn't post. That ended up being a motherboard issue. And you've just got to take it one step at a time, folks. I mean, some of these are going to be very frustrating. It's just the nature of the beast. And this one definitely bothered me a bit, but I am glad to see it back up and running. Regardless of what this person does with it, whether he mines or whether he games with it, he can do what he wants. Again, right? It's his rig, but I just hope that whatever he throws at it, the system can now handle it with the replacement power supply and the replacement motherboard. With that, if you guys enjoyed watching this one, give it a thumbs up. I would appreciate that. Consider subscribing if you have not already. We're slowly inching our way there toward 1 million subs. It would be cool to see 7 digits someday on the sub count. That would be pretty dang cool. I'm not even sure how I would feel there, but your viewership is greatly appreciated. That in and of itself is what allows us to continue doing what we're doing here. If you live in or around Orlando, Florida, by the way, and you have a broken system you'd like us to potentially fix for you free of charge, be sure to click the submission link below, and you can get started there. Fill out a description of the issue you're having and send some photos of your rig, a spec sheet, and we just might get to you. Again, I will catch you in the next one. I think we have 1 more episode left in this season. We do 20 episodes per season here in Fix or Flop. So it might be an easy one, might be a hard one. This one was definitely tough. It would have been a pretty cool finale. But there's still 1 more episode, so stay tuned for that. My name is Greg. Thanks for learning with me.